Hello. Now we will see how Feign is communicating with the server-side programming. For that, we will take a small example like a hello world kind of. Instead of hello world, we will try to retrieve the version is 2.0 success. This program we have written at service level, that is microservices student details. In controller we have defined. So to achieve fine client communication between fine with server side, for that we need to ensure a few steps. Those are: step 1, define interface and annotate it with method signatures. Also need to specify server side microservice name. As I earlier said that when you are going to work with Feign, OpenFeign, you need to define interface, and that interface is going to act as a Feign client, and that Feign client we need to define what kind of microservice we are going to retrieve. That details also we need to mention apart from the required annotations. And step 2, define controller, and whatever we defined interface, that interface logic we need to implement at controller side. And step 3, and whatever the main class we need to ensure at the rate enable Feign clients, then only it will be acting as a Feign client. Then step 4, we need to ensure server should run at a server side. And step 5, Feign client also should run. And step 6, open Eureka client in browser and verify whether Feign is running or not. So these are the steps we need to follow to create a Feign client application. Let us see how we can achieve that. I'm going to Feign client. These are all the things we already seen in earlier session. Now I'm going to define as a step 1. I will create the Feign client interface. So take one package, user interface. I'm going to define user interface. So for that I will define Feign client or user client. So I will define, and here interface we need to define user client interface. I am going to define. Then as I said that annotation we need to give Feign client, and what is the service you are going to access from server side. You can go server side and you will be able to see student microservice. You can copy paste and apply here student microservice. In big applications, in a big project, this would be like a big URL, HTTP localhost slash some user services, search users, or whatever the some product or anything you can define as a big URL. Since we are accessing, we are trying with a small example. This in this fully qualified name, it would be sufficient. So you can make a note. Sometimes in your big applications, this URL will be very lengthy also. Now since we are doing a small example, this is enough. Now signature. We need to define the method. What kind of method we are trying to access from the server? Get version. So we can define like this. You can go and verify at server side what is the method. You can see get version, that is a string type. So I am defining string type, and here you need to define whether you are going to access get or put or post. Since it is a small hello world kind of, we can use as a request mapping. Then request mapping, here you need to give the server side fully qualified path, that is a student and version. So you can give student and version. Then this import we need to do it. And this is what interface is defined. Feign client interface is defined. Now we need to define the controller. So let us define controller here. Package controller package, and here user controller. You can take user controller or home controller, anything. So I will define user controller, and this is a small plain old Java class. When you are defining REST controller, then only it will act as a REST controller. So for that you can define the controller package. Import, you can import REST controller, annotation REST controller. You can also verify server side what is the controller REST controller and what is the annotation. This is the REST controller annotation. Now as we are telling the steps, interface implementation code also we need to do that. Before that we need to make a Feign client should be a auto void. So for that we can define private user client, then this should be auto void. So you can import auto void, and here it is giving some error, that also you need to import user client import. Now you can define constructor user controller, and this one parameters, this dot user client equal to user client. Now we need to define the method signature. Method signature is public string get version, and here you need to call from Feign client. So user client dot get version, this is how we need to call, and this will be request mapping, and this request mapping is our own definition. You can define our own test Feign client, so you can annotate it. And this is a calling or not calling, how you are going to add return. So this is a return statement, and for this whether it is invoked or not, system.out.println inside Feign client I am copying. You can see whether this one is invoked or not when you are calling. And parallelly, if you want to test server side also, you can define inside version system.out.println inside server side programming. You can also define. Now client program is ready, server side programming is ready. So everything we made it. Now we can start server, we can start client, and we can start browser, and we can verify. So first we need to create we need to start Eureka, because Feign also should register at Eureka. In an earlier session we have seen. So let me start Eureka server. Then you can start student details. Let it start. Meanwhile we will also start Feign client. Now you can verify whether server is running or not. Now open the browser and you can verify by clearing this. Only one student microservice is registered at Eureka, and looks like a Feign client not yet started. If it is started, it will get registered at Eureka. Now it is started. Now we can test it. Feign client is running on 8081. So this is the URL, and what we have given, our test Feign client. This is what we have given at client side. So you can see client side test Feign client, and logs, for logs purpose we can clear this one, and server side also we can clear. We can open student service and we can see, and if you are hitting this one, you should get the details, get version details, and test Feign client. I think some problem with URL. Let me check. Here slash is missed. We can verify this. Now again server will start. We will verify. Now go and refresh Eureka and open, and now test Feign client. For this, whether logs are rolling or not, we can verify at student. Next, Feign also we can verify. Feign also we can verify. So if you are hitting this one, you should get the details. The version is 2.0 success. That means communication is happening. And see, inside server side programming, our request reached to server side, and our request is coming from the Feign. This is what Feign is communicating with server with the help of Eureka server, and this is how communication will happen between client and service, or else producer and consumer. So Feign client try to consume get version, and get version is whatever the get version implemented code at service side, the version is 2.0 success. So accordingly we got the success response. This is what Feign client communication with the server. In our next session we will see how we can make CRUD operations using Feign client with server side communication. Thank you.